Hello, students. We're going to take a look at math lesson 99 today in our Saxon Math book. It's dealing with the fraction, decimal, percentage, equivalence, and we're starting on page 513, so please open your books to page 513. That would be very helpful. To start off our lesson for today, just kind of reviews exactly what about fractions, decimals, and percentages, how they deal with numbers. So it says fractions, decimals, and percentages are three ways to express parts of a whole. Okay. An important skill that you're going to want to have, especially going on later on in life, is being able to change going from one form to the others. This lesson that we're going to talk about today is going to ask you to complete tables that show how to form equivalent fractions, equivalent decimals, equivalent percentages. So basically what that means is if I give you a fraction, you should know how to change it to both a decimal and a percent. Or if I give you a decimal, changing it from a fraction to percent, or if I give you the percent, changing it to a fraction or a decimal. So this is kind of a little bit of a clue for you. I think this helps me out too. I don't necessarily know that it mentions this in the book, so I thought this would be helpful for you. If you know what the fraction is, let's say, for example, this is my example. Let's say I've got 1/4 as my fraction. If you know the fraction, changing it to a decimal means you have to divide the denominator by the numerator, which means you may have to add zeros into your problem in order for you to get no remainder whatsoever. So what that means is you have 1/4. The first number, the 1, always goes in the box. So the 4 is going to go out front. I would go ahead and put your decimal point here. And for this particular lesson, I know for a fact I'm going to need to add a couple zeros behind it. So I say, how many times is 4 going to 1? Can't do it. How many times is 4 going to 10? Well, that's twice. Which if 4 times 2, that's going to be 8. And that 10 times 8 is 2. And now bring the 0 down. How many times can 4 go into 20? 4 go into 20 5 times, which is exactly 20. So if I subtract that, I get 0. So in order for me to change a fraction to a decimal, you're simply going to divide. Put the numerator in the box, put the denominator out front, and then you write it as a decimal number. So my decimal number here would be 25 hundredths, okay? If you know the fraction and you want to change it into a percentage, what that means is you're trying to put 100 into it. Because remember, the word percentage means out of 100. So all you have to do is take your fraction, which is 1/4, and you're going to multiply that by 100. And we did this a couple of lessons ago, where if you multiply by 100, it's the equivalent of multiplying by 100 over 1. And so what I would do is reduce before I multiply here. So I know that 4 and 100 can both be divisible by 4. So this is a 1, and this is a 25. Okay? And if I multiply across, that's 25 over 1, which is 25. And then we want to make sure to put the percentage symbol in there, which is 25%. So if you know the fraction, changing it to a decimal means dividing. 1 divided by 4. Or if you want to change it to a percentage, that means multiply by 100, okay, which would get you to 25%. What about if you know the decimal? Let's say, for example, my decimal number is 0.7, okay? So my decimal number is 0.7. If you know the decimal, changing it into a fraction, what I would do is actually just say the number correctly. So what I don't want you to say is, well, that's 0.7. That's not going to help you. You need to say the actual value, which would be 7/10. When you say it 7/10, you should hear the fraction, 7 over 10. The one thing you do have to make sure, though, class, is you have to make sure your final fraction is in lowest terms. It just so happens that 7/10 is in lowest terms. But if you had a decimal number like 0.2, for example, that would be 2/10. So I'd have to write 2 over 10. That is not in lowest terms. So we got to make sure to divide both those by 2. So my answer would be 1/5. Okay. So let's go back here. Then if you know the decimal number is 7/10, in order to change it into a percentage, you're going to do the exact same thing you did on the previous page. You're going to multiply that by 100. So I have 0.7, and I'm going to multiply that by 100 because I'm trying to put 100% into it. I'm trying to put the 100 into it. So by doing that, remember, just ignore the zeros. What's 7/10 times 1? Well, that's 7/10. Then the number of zeros, 2 here, tells you how many places to move the decimal. And I want to move that decimal to the right 2 places because I want to make the number bigger. If I was dividing, I'd move it to the left, but I'm multiplying, so I'm going to move it 2 places to the right. And anytime there's an open gap, I put a 0 there. So that means that answer is going to be 70, and then I label it with a percent. Okay, so changing it to percentage, you just basically multiplying by 100 every single time, whether it's a fraction or a decimal. The decimals are a little easier because all I have to do is move the decimal place over. Okay. Then what about if you know the percentage? Let's say, for example, you have 20%. If I want to change 20% into a fraction, what I'm going to do is I'm going to write that number over 100 because the word percentage means out of 100. So I'm going to go ahead and write 20 over 100. That's how you'd write it as a fraction. But just like the previous page, you got to make sure that it's in lowest terms. Right now, this is not in lowest terms because I can divide both of these numbers by 20. I'm going to divide both those numbers by 20. And if I do that, then I know that 20 divided by 20 is 1. 100 divided by 20 is 5. So my fraction in lowest terms is going to be 1/5. Okay, so again, write this number over 100, so 20 over 100, and then check to make sure it's in lowest terms. If I'm going to change it to a decimal, that means I want to take the 100 out of it. It's a percentage right now. I want to take 100 out of it. So that means I'm going to divide by 100. So I have the number 20, and in the number 20, the decimal point goes right here, and I'm going to divide that by 100. Okay, so now if I ignore the zeros, 20 divided by 1, that's 20. The 2 zeros tell me to move the decimal place. Now I'm not going to move it to the right because I don't want to make it bigger. I'm dividing. I want to make it smaller. So I'm going to move it 1, 2 places to the left. Okay, and so by doing that, my answer would be 2/10. If you were to write down 0.20, either one of these are acceptable answers. Remember, you don't have to have this last 0 in there. This is okay. If you did write that, I wouldn't mark that wrong. Okay. So now that's how you convert each one. So now what they're going to do today is, okay, here's a table, for example. Here we got a table, and I've got a fraction, 1/2. What I need to do is I need to change the 1/2. I got to write it as a decimal, and I got to write that as a percent. So when you read these, you're kind of going across this way. If you read them up and down, you're going to get confused. So you kind of read them across. All right. So let's start with my fraction. I have a fraction. I want to change it into decimal. In case you forgot, I'm dividing. So I would put the 1 inside the box, and I'm going to put the 2 out front. And I'm going to put my decimal point there. And I think for this particular problem, I just do 1 0 because 2 cannot go into 1, but 2 can go into 10, which is 5 times. And if I do the math on that, subtract that 0, no more numbers written down. So my decimal for this one is 5/10. To change that into a percentage means, well, I want to put the 100 into it. So that means I'm multiplying that by 100. So I'm going to multiply that number by 100, okay? And that means I'll move the decimal place over 2 places to the right. And so the answer would be 50%. Don't forget to put the percentage sign in there. Even though it says percent, we want to put that percentage sign in there. Here's my next row. I have a decimal number, 0.3, or if I say it correctly, 3/10. By saying it correctly, 3/10, you should hear the fraction, 3/10. And the good news is I think 3/10 is already in lowest terms. There's no reason I have to reduce that at all. So 3/10 would be my answer. To change it into a percent, like I did over here, I have 3/10. I'm going to multiply that by 100. So if I multiply that by 100, again, 0.3 or 3/10 times 1 is 3/10. The 2 zeros means move the decimal place over 2 places. So this answer right here is going to be 30%. Okay. Here's my last row. I know the percentage is 40%. If I'm going to change it to a fraction, remember, we're just going to put 40 over 100. Just put the number over 100, but I got to check to make sure it's in lowest terms. If I took a look at 40 and 100, I can divide both of those numbers by 20. Because if I do 40 divided by 20, that gives me 2. And if I take 100 divided by 20, that gives me 5. So my answer here would be 2/5. I know the percentage is 40%. I want to change it into a decimal. So since I'm trying to take the percentage out of it, I'm actually going to divide by 100. Okay, and remember, the decimal point goes right there if you don't have that written down. 40 divided by 1 is 40. I have 2 zeros here, so I move the decimal to the left 2 places, not the right, because I'm going to try to make it smaller. My answer is 4/10. All right, so if you take a look at your assignment for today, the assignment is going to be found on page 514 and 515. If you are still having a little bit of trouble with this, please feel free to rewatch the video, especially with those rules at the beginning. I think they would definitely help you a lot. If at any time you have questions during the entire assignment, again, don't hesitate to reach out to me. I'm here to help you the best that I can. If I don't hear from you again, I guess we'll see you at the next lesson.